Welcome to the program. My name is Tamara Rosevan. The EU Council's approval of visa-free travel for short visits has been dubbed as a giant step, a reward after nearly 3 years of reforms and anti-corruption measures. It's a historic win for Ukraine. To discuss this and more, we're joined by Boris Tarasiuk from Ukraine's Foreign Affairs Committee. So, what are Ukraine's next goals?
Well, the next goal is to factually receive non-visa regime or visa liberalization, which we hope will begin as of June 11th. Then, it's up to citizens of Ukraine to use this right of freedom of travel to countries of the European Union, altogether 30 countries. And if you are talking beyond the visa liberalization,
I'm talking about a wider European integration scope. How likely is Ukraine to develop tighter, closer relations with the 28-nation bloc?
From the very beginning, from the disruption of the former Soviet Union and restoration of Ukraine's independence, it was our objective to join both NATO and the European Union. For the time being, Ukraine is neither in NATO nor in the European Union. But the objectives remain as they were announced 25 years ago. So our objective is to join the European Union when it comes to the European Union and NATO. Whether it is foreseeable now, unfortunately not, because country is at war with aggressive Russia, because certain conditions have not yet been met, the so-called Copenhagen criteria. I guess that it would require some 5 to 10 years for Ukraine to be ready.
So these are more long-term plans. What about short-term plans for Ukraine's European integration? What's in the works?
Well, Ukraine has a multidimensional relationship with the European Union, especially after democracy gained the victory, February 2014. So our relationship are developing in a very good shape. The association agreement, a new type of agreement, which unfortunately does not provide for the membership perspective, was signed. Now this agreement is in force, but temporarily, because one country, the Netherlands, delayed the completion of the ratification procedure.
That's right. There was quite a strong disinformation campaign about the Dutch referendum on Ukraine's treaty with the EU. Now, do you think Ukraine is still being targeted with a disinformation campaign?
Ukraine happened to be the victim of anti-European tendencies in some leading EU member states, including the Netherlands. And the referendum which was applied for Ukraine expressed the result negative to Ukraine and finalization of ratification. The Netherlands remained the only one EU member state which has not completed the procedure of association agreement ratification. So I think that due to the internal political circumstances, this will be completed this year, and thus opening the way for the final and complete entry into force of the association agreement between Ukraine and the European Union.
So does disinformation still affect how European citizens view Ukraine, and will this disinformation affect Ukraine's further plans to join Europe and for closer ties?
This will not affect Ukraine's desire to be closer to the European Union and the final objective to join the European Union when the circumstances will be met. But this situation reflects the tendency in some leading EU member states. These tendencies are unfortunately very negative towards the European Union as such. I think that Ukraine happened to be the victim of these moods among the electorate in the Netherlands, so which was not directed against Ukraine specifically. It was targeted against the European Union as such. Like one of the candidates for the presidency in France, proposed to distance from the European Union, even to depart from the European Union. So this also is a reflection of anti-Euro integrationist process in the European Union and in the European member states.
Right. So this is part of a larger anti-European Union drive that far-right parties have been harnessing.
Nothing anti-Ukrainian.
Right. So you don't see this as being anything against targeting specifically Ukraine. So recently, in an interview with Ukrainian news portal Fakti, you said that Ukraine's accession to the EU is very difficult and, if not impossible, while there's a war going on in the east of the country. And there's a lot of other issues at hand as well, such as tackling corruption and persecution of high-level officials who have been caught in embezzlement and so on. So why do you believe that it's going to be difficult for Ukraine to become part of the European family?
There are several reasons. One of the reasons is, first of all, Ukraine is at war with the third largest military power in the world, Russia. And nobody, neither in the European Union nor in NATO, are dreaming of being involved. And that's why they prefer to stay at a distance from Ukraine. So it doesn't mean that they are deploring Ukraine. They're deploring Russia, they're expressing solidarity with Ukraine, but nevertheless it doesn't give them the political courage to take a decision to look at Ukraine as a future member of the European Union. So this is number one. Number two, as you refer to, Ukraine still has a lot of problems, internal problems, which cannot give the chance to be certified as a country meeting the Copenhagen criteria for membership. Including fighting corruption. Fighting corruption is one of the serious problems of Ukraine. And although the parliament made a lot of efforts to adopt necessary legislation, still the practice of implementing these laws, the practice of work of anti-corruption agencies, we have a lot of them. So does not yet satisfy the ordinary Ukrainian citizen, first of all. And second, these practices do not satisfy the countries of the European Union.
Right. So, but Ukraine's President Petro Poroshenko recently said, that Ukraine plans to gain EU membership by as early as 2020. Now, is that realistic in your mind?
2020, to my mind, is not realistic. I think that from the year the European Union politically is ready to say, yes, we see Ukraine as a future member of the European Union, from this time, we should add some 7 to 10 years. Only after this recognition of the future membership for Ukraine. So for the time being, there is no political decision in the European Union about possible EU membership for Ukraine. So that's why it is very hypothetical to speak about the years. So my estimation is 7 to 10 years after the political decision of the European Union.
So coming back to the visa-free regime, how will it affect Ukrainians living in Russian-occupied Crimea?
Well, as soon as they are keeping their legal affiliation to Ukraine as a Ukrainian citizens, it is feasible for them to enjoy this visa liberalization regime. For this, they have to keep their passport. For this, they have to keep the to be linked to Ukraine as a state, to apply for Ukrainian passport with biometrical data. So only after this they can enjoy, like other Ukrainian citizens, the right to travel according to visa liberalization. Without this, they will not enjoy visa liberalization travel as soon as they are in the occupied territories, as soon as they are not in the territories which are being under control of Ukrainian authorities.
And do you see this as a way to bring Crimean residents closer to Ukraine and distance them from Russia?
The pressure which Russia is exerting on the Ukrainian citizens in the Crimea does not provide for the freedom of choice for them. They have to admit that they are Russian citizens, or to deny that they are Russian citizens, to repeat and to confirm that they are Ukrainian citizens. In this case, they will be intimidated, they will be persecuted by the Russian law enforcement authorities, which is the case now. But theoretically, they have the right to apply for Ukrainian passport as soon as they are keeping their relationship with the state of Ukraine and enjoy visa liberalization regime.
And do you know of any statistics of how many, over the past 3 to 2 years, how many Crimeans have sought a Ukrainian biometric passport? Does the Foreign Affairs Ministry have any data on that?
You should ask the Foreign Affairs Ministry. I am not in the Foreign Affairs Ministry, but nevertheless, I don't have these figures answering your question. But what I know that only 10% of Ukrainians are enjoying traveling to the countries of the European Union. Only 10%. And more than 80%, they either do not have the interest or they don't have money to travel. So the provision to Ukrainians of visa liberalization regime will only after its introduction indicate the figures, whether they have the tendency to be changed into the increase of those wishing to travel.
Right. Okay. Well, it seems that Ukraine's future goals are quite set, and there's still quite a lot to achieve. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
We've been joined by Boris Tarasiuk from Ukraine's Foreign Affairs Committee. We've been discussing Ukraine's future goals for European integration, as well as the impending visa-free regime to most European countries. You're watching UATV.